The arena stretched across 3 kilometers of polished metal and energy barriers, its walls rising into darkness that seemed to swallow light itself. Massive viewing platforms floated at various heights, each one packed with representatives from dozens of galactic species. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime as thousands of different languages merged into a cacophony of excitement and anticipation. Marcus Chen stood at the edge of Platform 7, his human frame dwarfed by the towering Krillian warriors beside him. Their crystalline exoskeletons caught the arena's harsh lighting, creating prismatic rainbows that danced across their angular faces. To his left, a cluster of Vorthak delegates whispered among themselves, their tentacled forms writhing with nervous energy. Their bioluminescent patches pulsed in patterns that Marcus had learned to recognize as expressions of extreme agitation. The human wasn't supposed to be here. Earth had been granted observer status in the Galactic Coalition only 6 months ago, and this was the first time any human had been permitted to witness the sacred trials of supremacy. The trials determined which species would hold dominance over the contested Zarian system, a cluster of resource-rich worlds that had sparked conflicts across 3 star sectors. Marcus adjusted his simple gray uniform, feeling profoundly out of place among the elaborate ceremonial armor and biomodifications of the other spectators. His species was considered primitive by galactic standards. Humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel and possessed no notable physical advantages. They weren't particularly strong like the Krillians, didn't have the Vorthak's natural psychic abilities, and lacked the technological mastery of the silicon-based Nexari. Earth's inclusion in the Coalition had been more of a diplomatic courtesy than recognition of any real capability. The arena floor began to shift and reconfigure itself. Massive platforms rose from hidden compartments while energy barriers snapped into existence, creating a complex battlefield of elevated positions, cover points, and hazardous zones marked by crackling force fields. The crowd's noise level increased dramatically as anticipation reached fever pitch. "Remarkable engineering," Marcus murmured to himself, watching robotic systems work with impossible precision to construct the combat environment. A Krillian warrior standing nearby overheard him and turned its faceted head toward the human. "You appreciate our arena's sophistication? How quaint. I suppose even primitive species can recognize superior craftsmanship when they observe it." Marcus smiled politely, choosing not to take offense. "It's certainly impressive. The modularity allows for countless battlefield configurations. Very adaptable design." The Krillians' mandibles clicked in what Marcus had learned was their equivalent of condescending laughter. Adaptable, yes. Though adaptation matters little when facing absolute superiority. The Zarethian champion will demonstrate this truth shortly. Across the platform, a group of Vorthak delegates had been listening to the exchange. One of them, its bioluminescent patches glowing with amber skepticism, glided closer on its muscular tail. "The Krillian speaks boldly for a species that has never won the sacred trials. Perhaps this cycle will be different, though I doubt it." The tension between the 2 species was immediately apparent. Marcus had read the briefing materials during his journey to the arena world, learning about the complex web of rivalries and alliances that shaped galactic politics. The Krillians prided themselves on their martial prowess and technological advancement, while the Vorthak considered themselves intellectually superior with their natural telepathic abilities and sophisticated biotechnology. "Both of your species have impressive champions," Marcus offered diplomatically. "I'm honored to witness such a historic competition." The Vorthak's patches shifted to a pale green that Marcus interpreted as mild amusement. "Historic indeed, though perhaps not in the way you imagine, human. The trials have been held for over 2,000 standard years. In all that time, only 3 species have ever claimed victory. The Zarethians have won 67 times, the Nexari 43 times, and the Hegemony 22 times. All others have failed repeatedly." Marcus found this statistic fascinating. What makes those three species so dominant? Power, the Krillian interrupted, its voice resonating through its vocal modulators. The Zarethians are apex predators from a death world where survival requires constant combat. The Nexari have transcended biological limitations through cybernetic enhancement. The hegemony. The creature paused, its exoskeleton dimming slightly. The hegemony represents a fusion of multiple conquered species, combining the best traits of each. The arena's lighting suddenly shifted to deep red, and a thunderous announcement echoed from hidden speakers throughout the massive structure. Though the words were in the ancient galactic common tongue, Marcus's translation device rendered them in crisp English. Citizens of the galaxy, the sacred trials of supremacy commence. Today, 5 champions representing 5 great species will compete for dominion over the Xerian system. Victory brings not only territorial rights, but recognition as a dominant force in galactic civilization. The crowd erupted in cheers, roars, and various sounds that Marcus's human ears couldn't properly classify. The excitement was infectious, and he found himself leaning forward to get a better view of the arena floor. First to enter the field of honor, representing the Krillian collective, Champion Thex Valor. A section of the arena floor Iris had opened, and a massive figure emerged on a rising platform. The Krillian champion stood nearly 4 meters tall, its crystalline exoskeleton polished to mirror perfection. But this wasn't the standard Krillian form Marcus had become familiar with. This creature had been heavily modified for combat, with additional armor plating, extended limbs ending in razor-sharp claws, and what appeared to be integrated weapon systems built into its forearms. The champion raised all 4 of its arms in salute, and the crowd of Krillians on various platforms responded with a sound like breaking glass that somehow conveyed triumph and bloodlust. Second to enter, representing the Vorthak unity, Champion Melthysis. Another platform rose, revealing a Vorthak unlike any Marcus had seen before. While most Vorthak were roughly humanoid from the waist up with tentacled lower bodies, this champion had been extensively modified. Its form was sleeker, more predatory, with bioluminescent patches covering nearly its entire body. As Marcus watched, the champion's skin began shifting colors in rapid patterns, creating an almost hypnotic display. The Vorthak delegates around Marcus began pulsing their own patterns in response, creating a light show that was both beautiful and somehow unsettling. Third to enter, representing the Nexari synthesis, Champion Unit Designation Omega Prime. The third platform revealed something that barely looked biological at all. The Nexari champion was a fusion of metal, synthetic materials, and what Marcus assumed was heavily modified organic tissue. It stood on 2 legs, but its torso was elongated and studded with various technological implements. Multiple arms extended from its body at different points, each ending in different types of manipulator appendages. Its head was a smooth dome of polished metal, with glowing sensors arranged in geometric patterns. Fourth to enter, representing the hegemony of United Worlds, Champion Designation Conquest Bringer. Marcus had to suppress a gasp when the 4th champion appeared. The hegemony representative was a nightmare fusion of different species traits. It had the basic body plan of a Krillian, but with Vorthak biotechnology integrated throughout, Nexari cybernetic enhancements, and what appeared to be genetic material from several other species Marcus didn't recognize. The result was something that looked like it had been designed by committee to be as intimidating as possible. And finally, the announcer's voice carried a note of confusion that translated clearly through the devices, representing Earth, Champion, Marcus Chen. The arena fell silent. Marcus felt every eye, sensor, and detection device in the massive structure focus on him. His stomach dropped as he realized what was happening. "There must be some mistake," he said, his voice barely a whisper. The Krillian beside him stepped back, its exoskeleton now pulsing with what Marcus had learned was extreme agitation. "The human? But humans aren't even capable of combat at this level. This is impossible." The Vorthak delegate's bioluminescent patches had shifted to a deep purple that Marcus didn't recognize but somehow knew indicated profound shock. "The trials have never... No species has been permitted to compete without demonstrating basic combat capability." Marcus's translation device crackled to life with an incoming personal communication. "Marcus Chen, you are required to report to Transport Bay 12 immediately for preparation and transport to the arena floor. Failure to comply will result in immediate forfeiture and permanent exclusion of your species from coalition consideration." The human stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. This had to be some kind of mistake, some bureaucratic error or translation problem. He was here as an observer, nothing more. Earth didn't even have a trained champion. The strongest human fighters were nowhere near the level of these genetically and technologically enhanced warriors. I think there's been a misunderstanding," Marcus said to no one in particular. "I'm not a champion. I'm just here to observe." But even as he spoke, Marcus could see coalition officials making their way toward his platform, their expressions indicating that this was not, in fact, a mistake. Somehow, through some process he didn't understand, Earth had been entered into the competition, and he was their representative. The arena remained silent except for the low hum of energy systems and the whispered conversations of thousands of beings trying to process what they had just witnessed. In the center of the arena floor, 4 of the galaxy's most fearsome warriors waited, while a simple human in a gray uniform tried to understand how his quiet observation mission had just become a fight for his life and the future of his entire species. Marcus took a deep breath and began walking toward the transport bay, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything for humanity's place in the galaxy. Behind him, he could hear the confused murmurs of alien dignitaries trying to comprehend how a species they considered barely worthy of observer status had suddenly become a competitor in the most important military trial in the known galaxy. The transport bay doors slid open as he approached, revealing a gleaming shuttle that would carry him to a battlefield designed for beings far more powerful than any human. As he stepped inside, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if he was about to become the shortest-lived champion in the history of the sacred trials, or if something else entirely was about to unfold. The shuttle sealed itself and began its short journey to the arena floor, carrying Earth's unwitting representative toward a confrontation that would test not just his survival skills, but the very assumptions the galaxy held about human potential. The shuttle's interior was designed for beings much larger than Marcus, leaving him sitting in a seat that could have accommodated 3 humans. As the craft descended toward the arena floor, he tried to process what was happening while examining the combat gear that had been provided. The equipment looked standard enough, but everything was sized for beings with different physiology than humans. The armor was clearly Nexari designed, featuring adaptive smart materials that would theoretically adjust to fit any species. As Marcus pulled it on, the metallic fabric contracted and reshaped itself around his frame, though it still felt loose and unfamiliar. The helmet was the most advanced piece of technology he had ever worn, featuring a heads-up display that immediately began analyzing his surroundings and vital signs. A weapon had been provided as well, though Marcus wasn't sure what to call it. It looked like a rifle but felt heavier than anything he had ever handled. According to the display information flickering across his helmet's visor, it was called a plasma displacement cannon, and had enough power to punch through reinforced battle armor. The weight distribution was awkward for human hands, clearly designed for beings with different proportions. The shuttle touched down at the center of the arena with a soft thud that Marcus felt more than heard. Through the small viewport, He could see the 4 other champions positioned at various points around the massive combat zone. Each was stationed on a different platform, roughly equidistant from the center and from each other, creating a 5-pointed star formation. "Champion Chen," came a voice through his helmet's communication system. "You will exit the shuttle when the combat barriers activate. The trial will begin 30 seconds after all champions are in position. Victory conditions are simple. Be the last champion remaining conscious and capable of combat. Use of any means necessary is permitted within the established rules of engagement." Marcus's mouth went dry. What exactly are the rules of engagement? No external assistance, no modification of arena systems, no targeting of spectator areas. Combat continues until victory conditions are met. The voice paused. "Are you prepared to represent your species, Champion Chen?" There was something in that question that made Marcus pause. The way it was phrased suggested that the speaker knew something Marcus didn't. But there was no time to ask for clarification. The shuttle doors were already beginning to open. Marcus stepped out onto the arena floor, and immediately the scale of the place became apparent. What had seemed large from the observation platforms was truly massive from ground level. The various platforms, barriers, and obstacles stretched out in all directions, creating a complex, 3-dimensional battlefield that would challenge even the most experienced warriors. He could see the other champions more clearly now. The Krillian, Thek's Valor, was testing the edge of one of its arm-mounted blades against a metal barrier, leaving deep scratches in material that was supposedly nearly indestructible. The Vorthak champion, Meltissus, was moving through a series of what appeared to be warm-up exercises, its bioluminescent patches cycling through rapid patterns that made Marcus's eyes water to look at directly. The Nexari champion, Omega Prime, stood perfectly still, but Marcus could see various sensors and scanning devices extending from its body as it analyzed the battlefield. Most disturbing was the Hegemony champion, Conquest Bringer, which was examining the arena not like someone preparing for combat, but like a predator evaluating prey. Marcus found his assigned starting position, a circular platform about 20 meters in diameter. As he stepped onto it, energy barriers immediately sprang up around the entire arena floor, separating the combat zone from the spectator areas. The barriers glowed with a faint blue light that Marcus's helmet display identified as containing enough energy to vaporize anything that tried to pass through them. 10 seconds to combat initiation, announced the arena's automated system. Marcus checked his weapon one more time, though he had no real idea how to use it effectively. His military training from Earth seemed laughably inadequate for this situation. He had served in the Army for 6 years, but his experience was with conventional weapons against human opponents, not alien super soldiers with advanced technology. 5 seconds. Around the arena, Marcus could see the other champions settling into combat stances. Each looked like they had been born for this kind of fighting. Marcus just tried not to trip over his own feet. Combat initiated. Sacred trials of supremacy are now active. For a moment, nothing happened. The 5 champions remained on their platforms, apparently taking time to assess the situation and their opponents. Marcus used the brief respite to study his surroundings more carefully. The arena floor was a maze of elevated platforms connected by bridges, with various types of cover and obstacles scattered throughout. Some areas glowed with energy that his helmet marked as hazardous, while others seemed to offer strategic advantages. The first move came from the Krillian champion. With explosive speed, Thek's Valor launched itself from its platform, using built-in thrusters to cross a gap that would have been impossible for most beings to jump. It landed on a platform about halfway between its starting position and where the Vorthak champion was positioned, immediately bringing up arm-mounted energy weapons. Melthesis responded by dropping below the line of sight, using its natural agility to move between cover points, while its bioluminescent patches began strobing in patterns that Marcus's helmet warned were designed to disorient opponents. The Nexari champion took a completely different approach, extending what appeared to be scanning tendrils in all directions while remaining on its starting platform. Marcus realized it was mapping the arena and tracking the positions of all other champions simultaneously. Conquest Bringer, the hegemony representative, began moving with deliberate precision toward the center of the arena, not bothering with cover or stealth. It moved like something that feared nothing and expected everything to get out of its way. Marcus remained on his platform, partly from tactical caution and partly because he honestly wasn't sure what else to do. His helmet's sensors were providing him with information about the other champion's movements, but he had no framework for processing that data into useful strategy. The first actual combat began when the Krillian and Vorthak champions encountered each other on one of the mid-level platforms. Thex Valor's energy weapons blazed to life, sending streams of superheated plasma toward Melthesis, who responded by moving in ways that seemed to defy physics. The Vorthak's body flowed like liquid, while its own weapons, organic projectiles that appeared to be some kind of bioengineered ammunition, sought targets with guided intelligence. Marcus watched in fascination as the two champions engaged in combat that was more like a deadly dance than anything he had ever seen in human warfare. Both beings moved with speed and precision that would have been impossible for unmodified humans, their weapon systems firing with accuracy that his helmet's targeting system rated as beyond calculation parameters. While the Krillian and Vorthak fought, the Nexari champion had completed its scanning process and began moving. But instead of heading toward the combat, it started moving toward Marcus's position. Its approach was methodical and unstoppable, using mechanical appendages to traverse the arena's obstacles with mechanical precision. Marcus's helmet immediately began providing tactical warnings. Hostile approach detected. Recommend immediate relocation to defensive position. But as Marcus prepared to move, something unexpected happened. The hegemony champion, which had been steadily advancing toward the center of the arena, suddenly changed course. Instead of continuing toward the middle of the battlefield, Conquest Bringer began moving directly toward the Nexari champion. What happened next was the first truly surprising thing Marcus had witnessed since the trial began. The Nexari champion, despite being in the middle of its approach toward Marcus, immediately stopped and began backing away from the hegemony representative. It wasn't a tactical withdrawal or a repositioning maneuver. It was clearly retreat. Marcus's helmet was silent for a moment before providing an analysis that made no sense. Nexari champion exhibiting avoidance behavior inconsistent with established combat protocols. As the Nexari continued to back away, the hegemony champion also stopped advancing. The two powerful beings seemed to be engaged in some kind of standoff that Marcus didn't understand. But what happened next was even more confusing. The Nexari champion, Omega Prime, began transmitting something on an open frequency that Marcus's helmet automatically intercepted and translated. Withdrawal request acknowledged. Combat disengagement accepted. Then, to the absolute amazement of everyone watching, the Nexari champion walked to the edge of the arena and simply shut itself down. Its various systems powered down one by one until it stood motionless against the energy barrier. According to Marcus's helmet, all of its combat systems had been voluntarily deactivated. The arena fell silent except for the ongoing battle between the Krillian and Vorthak champions, who seemed too focused on their own combat to notice what had just happened. Marcus stared at the deactivated Nexari champion, trying to understand what he had just witnessed. The hegemony champion had not even engaged in combat, yet had somehow convinced one of the most advanced warriors in the galaxy to voluntarily withdraw from the competition. As Marcus watched, Conquest Bringer turned its attention toward him. and for the first time since the trial had begun, Marcus felt real fear. But before the hegemony champion could begin moving toward him, the Krillian-Vorthak battle reached a dramatic conclusion. Thek's valor had apparently gained the upper hand, using its superior firepower to pin Melthissus behind cover. But the Vorthak champion had one more surprise in store. All of its bioluminescent patches suddenly flared to maximum brightness, creating a light show so intense that every being in the arena was momentarily blinded, including Marcus, despite his helmet's protective filters. When his vision cleared, the Vorthak champion was gone, and the Krillian was staggering around its platform, clearly disoriented. Marcus's helmet began tracking movement and quickly located Melthissus. The Vorthak had somehow used the blinding flash to relocate to a position directly above the Krillian champion. But instead of launching an attack, the Vorthak did something that shocked Marcus even more than the Nexari's withdrawal. Melthissus began transmitting on the same frequency the Nexari had used. Combat cessation requested. Honorable withdrawal acknowledged. And just like the Nexari, the Vorthak champion moved to the arena's edge and deactivated its combat systems, leaving itself defenseless against the energy barriers. Marcus was now alone on the battlefield with only two active champions, himself and the terrifying hegemony representative. The Krillian champion, Thek's valor, was still active but was clearly no longer participating in meaningful combat. It moved sluggishly, as if its systems had been damaged or compromised in some way. As Marcus tried to process what was happening, his helmet provided another impossible update. Krillian champion combat effectiveness degraded to 12%, withdrawal from combat anticipated. Sure enough, Thek's valor began making its way toward the arena's edge, moving like a being that had already accepted defeat. It reached the energy barrier and began the same shutdown sequence as the others, leaving only Marcus and Conquest Bringer active on the battlefield. The arena was now eerily quiet. Marcus stood alone on his platform while the most dangerous warrior in the galaxy began moving toward him with obvious predatory intent. Every instinct told him to run, but there was nowhere to go within the confines of the arena. As Conquest Bringer approached, Marcus noticed something that his helmet's sensors confirmed. The hegemony champion's weapons were still powered down. Despite having eliminated 3 other champions without firing a shot, it had not yet activated any of its offensive systems. Marcus raised his weapon, though he had no illusion that it would be effective against such an advanced opponent. But as he did, something unprecedented happened. Conquest Bringer stopped moving. Its various sensor arrays focused on Marcus for several long moments, and then, impossibly, it began backing away. Marcus's helmet was practically screaming warnings and contradictions. Hegemony combat doctrine does not include withdrawal. Current behavior inconsistent with all established patterns. Analysis inconclusive. But there was no mistaking what was happening. The most powerful warrior in the competition was retreating from a human who had never fired a shot in anger during the entire trial. As Marcus watched in complete bewilderment, Conquest Bringer reached the arena's edge and began the same shutdown sequence as the other 3 champions. Within moments, all 4 of the galaxy's most advanced warriors stood motionless against the energy barriers, having voluntarily surrendered to a human who had done nothing but stand on a platform and watch. The arena's automated systems seemed as confused as everyone else, taking several minutes before finally announcing, "Combat concluded. Victory condition achieved. Champion Marcus Chen of Earth declared winner by opponent forfeit." Marcus stood alone in the center of the arena, still holding a weapon he had never fired, surrounded by 4 deactivated champions who had given up without him understanding why. The silence from the spectator platforms was absolute, as if the entire galaxy was trying to process what they had just witnessed. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Marcus began to suspect that his presence here had not been the mistake he had assumed. But if this had been intentional, the question remained, who had arranged it, and what did they know about humans that the rest of the galaxy clearly didn't? The victory celebration that should have followed never came. Instead, Marcus found himself standing in the center of the arena while complete silence stretched across every spectator platform. The 4 deactivated champions remained motionless against the energy barriers, their surrender as mysterious now as it had been when it happened. Marcus's helmet continued to provide updates that made no sense. Arena systems nominal, victory confirmed, champion status activated. Awaiting standard post-trial protocols. But nothing about this situation was standard, and everyone in the galaxy seemed to know it, except him. The energy barriers around the arena floor suddenly shifted from blue to amber, and Marcus heard the familiar hum of transport systems activating. Within moments, a delegation of coalition officials materialized on the arena floor, their faces bearing expressions that Marcus had learned to recognize as carefully controlled panic across multiple species. The lead official was a Vorthak, whose bioluminescent patches were cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. Behind it came representatives from several other species, all wearing ceremonial robes that marked them as high-ranking members of the Coalition's governing council. "Champion Chen," the lead official began, its translation device rendering the words with careful formality. "We must speak with you immediately. There are questions that require answers." Marcus gestured toward the 4 deactivated champions. "I think I have a few questions myself. I'm not sure what happened here, but I can guarantee it wasn't anything I did." The Vorthak's patches shifted to what Marcus recognized as deep concern. That, Champion Chen, may be precisely the problem. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, the official delegation was joined by another group that made his helmet's threat assessment system activate immediately. These newcomers were clearly military, representing the enforcement arms of several major galactic powers. Their equipment was active, their postures alert, and their attention focused entirely on Marcus. "Sir," one of the coalition officials said, this one appearing to be from a species Marcus didn't recognize, "we need to escort you to a secure location for debriefing. What happened here today has implications that extend far beyond the sacred trials." Marcus looked around at the assembled officials and military personnel, noting that while their weapons weren't drawn, everyone was clearly on high alert. "Am I under arrest?" "Not exactly," the Vorthak replied. "But you may be the most important being in the galaxy right now, and we need to understand why." As the group prepared to leave the arena floor, Marcus took one last look at the 4 deactivated champions. His helmet was still analyzing their status, and the readouts were beginning to reveal something that explained the official's concern. According to his sensors, none of the champions had been damaged during the trial. Their systems showed perfect functionality. They had not been defeated, disabled, or forced to surrender. They had simply chosen to stop fighting. And that choice appeared to have been unanimous and immediate. The transport to the debriefing facility gave Marcus time to review what had happened, but the more he thought about it, the less sense it made. He had done nothing except exist in the arena. He hadn't demonstrated superior technology, overwhelming force, or even basic combat skills. He had been a passive observer who somehow caused 4 of the galaxy's most dangerous warriors to voluntarily surrender. The debriefing facility turned out to be a massive space station orbiting the arena world. As their shuttle docked, Marcus could see that it was heavily fortified and surrounded by warships from multiple species. Whatever was happening, the galactic powers were taking it very seriously. The debriefing room was designed to accommodate representatives from dozens of species simultaneously. As Marcus was escorted inside, he found himself facing what appeared to be an emergency session of the Coalition's highest leadership. The circular chamber was filled with beings he recognized from diplomatic archives as some of the most powerful individuals in known space. "Champion Chen," began a figure Marcus recognized as the Coalition's supreme arbiter, a position that rotated between species every 5 years. We need you to understand the magnitude of what occurred today. In over 2,000 years of sacred trials, no champion has ever surrendered without sustaining significant damage or facing imminent defeat. Today, 4 champions surrendered simultaneously to an opponent who never engaged in combat. Marcus took a seat that had been configured for human physiology. I understand that it was unusual, but I honestly have no idea why it happened. I didn't do anything. A new voice spoke up from the chamber's elevated sections. This speaker was hidden by a privacy screen, but the voice carried the mechanical precision that Marcus associated with the Nexari. That may be precisely why it happened, Champion Chen. We have been analyzing the combat recordings, and we have identified something that requires explanation. The chamber's central display activated, showing a detailed recording of the trial from multiple angles. Marcus watched himself standing on his platform, looking confused and out of place, while the other champions prepared for battle. Computer, enhance biometric analysis of all champions during the initial assessment phase, the Nexari voice commanded. The display shifted to show readouts of vital signs, stress indicators, and combat readiness metrics for all 5 champions. Marcus's readings showed elevated heart rate and stress levels consistent with someone who was nervous but not immediately threatened. But the readings for the other 4 champions showed something else entirely. All 4 opposing champions registered maximum threat assessment within 30 seconds of combat initiation, the voice continued. Their biometric readings indicate genuine fear, not tactical caution. Marcus stared at the display. Fear? Of what? I wasn't even armed properly. Another speaker activated, this one from the Krillian section of the chamber. Champion Chen, what is your military background on Earth? Marcus found the question odd, but answered honestly. I served 6 years in the Army. Combat engineer, mostly construction and demolition work. Some basic infantry training, but nothing special. And your technological background? I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I work for a civilian construction company. Again, nothing special by galactic standards. The speakers fell silent for several minutes, and Marcus could hear the soft sounds of rapid communication between different species as they processed this information. Finally, the Supreme Arbiter spoke again. Champion Chen, we believe we may have identified why the other champions surrendered, but the explanation raises questions that are deeply troubling for galactic security. The central display changed to show a complex analytical breakdown that Marcus's translation software struggled to process. But as he watched, patterns began to emerge from the data. In the past 6 months since Earth joined the Coalition as an observer, our intelligence services have been conducting standard assessments of human capabilities, the Arbiter continued. What they discovered has been classified at the highest levels until now. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's climate control. What kind of capabilities? Humans appear to be the first species ever encountered that has developed advanced warfare capabilities without developing advanced warrior castes, came a new voice from the chamber's upper levels. Your military history shows consistent patterns of ordinary individuals achieving extraordinary results under pressure. The display shifted to show what appeared to be historical analysis of human warfare, comparing it to the military traditions of other galactic species. Marcus began to understand what had the Coalition so concerned. Every other species we have encountered develops specialized warrior classes as their military technology advances, the Supreme Arbiter explained. The Krillians have their battle forms, the Vorthak have their mind warriors, the Nexari create specialized combat units, but humans train ordinary individuals to be extraordinarily dangerous when necessary. Marcus thought about Earth's military history, from ancient armies of citizen soldiers to modern forces where a simple infantryman could call down devastating firepower. You're saying that other species see us as unpredictable because we don't fit their patterns? More than that, the Nexari voice replied. Analysis of human combat history reveals tactical flexibility that other species consider impossible. Humans regularly defeat superior forces through improvisation, adaptation, and what you call thinking outside the box. To species that rely on established warrior traditions, this makes humans appear to possess supernatural combat abilities. The chamber fell silent again as Marcus processed this information. Finally, he asked the question that seemed most important. Are you saying that the other champions surrendered because they were afraid of human unpredictability? We believe they surrendered, the Supreme Arbiter said carefully, because their tactical analysis systems classified humans as an unknown threat that could not be properly assessed. When facing an enemy whose capabilities cannot be measured, the safest assumption is that those capabilities are overwhelming. Marcus looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. These beings commanded technology that could reshape worlds, but they were afraid of humans because humans didn't fight the way they expected. "There's something else," came another voice from the chamber's upper reaches. This speaker remained anonymous behind privacy screens. Our analysts have been studying Earth's civilian population as well as its military forces. What they have discovered is even more concerning than human military capabilities. The display changed to show analysis of human civilian activities. Construction workers, engineers, scientists, teachers. Human civilians routinely engage in activities that other species would classify as extreme risk behavior. Your construction workers operate at heights that would terrify most species. Your emergency responders voluntarily enter dangerous situations. Your explorers actively seek out unknown hazards. Marcus began to laugh, though he tried to suppress it out of respect for the seriousness of the situation. "You're afraid of us because we're willing to take risks?" "Champion Chen," the Supreme Arbiter said with obvious gravity, "risk assessment is fundamental to survival for any intelligent species. Most species develop increasingly sophisticated methods for avoiding danger as they advance technologically. Humans appear to have developed increasingly sophisticated methods for managing danger while accepting it as inevitable." The implications were beginning to sink in. So when you look at humans, you see a species that should have been extinct long ago, but somehow isn't. "Worse," the anonymous voice replied. "We see a species that has survived and thrived specifically because of behaviors that should have led to extinction. This suggests either remarkable luck or capabilities we cannot comprehend." Marcus stood up and walked to the center of the chamber, looking up at the various tiers of hidden speakers and delegates. "What happens now? I won the trial by accident, but I assume that victory has consequences." The Supreme Arbiter's response came with obvious reluctance. "By law and tradition, your species now holds dominion over the Xerion system. More importantly, Earth has demonstrated military capability sufficient to warrant elevation from observer status to full coalition membership." "But," the Nexari voice added, "your species will be subject to restrictions and monitoring protocols that have never been applied to any other coalition member. The galaxy needs time to understand what humans represent before allowing unrestricted access to advanced technology." Marcus nodded, understanding that he had inadvertently changed humanity's place in the galaxy simply by showing up and being human. "And the other champions? What happens to them?" "They will recover from their tactical paralysis. Eventually," another speaker replied. "But word of what happened here will spread throughout the galaxy. Every military force, every intelligence service, every strategic planning committee will be forced to reconsider their assumptions about warfare in light of human unpredictability." As the debriefing session continued, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what had occurred. He hadn't won the sacred trials through superior skill or technology. He had won because humanity's approach to danger and conflict was so fundamentally different from every other species that it had triggered what amounted to a galaxy-wide system error. The other champions hadn't surrendered to him. They had surrendered to the unknown variable that humanity represented, choosing the safety of defeat over the risk of engaging with something their tactical systems couldn't properly categorize. Hours later, as Marcus prepared for the journey back to Earth with news that would change his entire species' future, he realized that humans hadn't needed to prove they were the strongest or the smartest to earn their place among the stars. They had simply needed to be themselves, adaptable, willing to take risks, and impossible to predict. The galaxy would spend years trying to understand what made humans so uniquely dangerous, never realizing that the answer was simpler than any of them could imagine. Humans weren't dangerous because they were superior warriors or possessed advanced technology. They were dangerous because they were human, and sometimes that was enough to make the impossible seem inevitable. As his transport ship departed the arena world, Marcus looked back at the massive structure where 4 of the galaxy's greatest warriors had decided that discretion was the better part of valor when faced with a simple human who had never intended to fight at all. The irony wasn't lost on him. In trying to prove they belonged among the stars, humans had accidentally proven that the stars needed to make room for something they had never encountered before. A species that considered dangerous situations to be puzzles waiting to be solved rather than threats to be avoided at all costs.